Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Sean Roy. I am a white male with very short, dark hair. I'm wearing a gray sweater because it's never not sweater weather in Minnesota, where I am. I'm sitting in my basement office with pictures and books behind me to make my life look a lot more organized than it really is. I am the co-manager of the Youth Employment Solutions Center. My fellow co-manager, Serena Lowe from TASH, will be joining us a little bit later. I am with an organization called Transcend, and we are partners with TASH and the Youth Employment Solutions Center. And our goal as a technical assistance center is to promote state systems change that leads to improved employment outcomes for students with disabilities, including those with high support needs. You'll notice that in the title of today's webinar, we very intentionally put the words elevating the student advocate voice. In almost every piece of research-based transition models and structure that you would find, from the NASET National Alliance for Secondary Education and Transition National Standards, to the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition Taxonomy, to the guideposts to success from the National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability, you'll find that student self-determination is an essential component of transition success, yet it seems to be one of the areas that we as professionals, be it educators or employment professionals or advocates, really seem to struggle. And that's why I am so excited to bring you today the great presenters and the panel. So hopefully we can increase your knowledge of current practices. Maybe we can clarify exactly what is meant by effective self-advocacy and self-determination. Want you to have some great tools shared with you, and we want you to hear from the direct experience of self-advocates that are really trying to embed employment into their lives. So next slide, please. Let's meet the people who are going to be talking today. Today's speakers, we have Dr. John Mcnaught, we have Hassan Davis, and then we have a self-advocate panel for you at the end, which we're very excited about. Patrick Mack, he is from South Carolina. Josh Tuttle, he is from Utah. And Kamisha Harivo, she's coming to us from Massachusetts, and you're going to be able to hear from them a little bit later. So first, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. John Mcnaught. He is the co-director at the Virginia Department of Education's Training and Technical Assistance Center at James Madison University, where he focuses on behavior, transition, and self-determination. Now, I have met John several times as our paths seems to cross, most often in the state of Texas for some reason. And I have had the opportunity to hear him speak. And I think that the way that he and his staff approach self-determination is probably the most effective that I have heard. So when we decided we were doing a session on self-determination, John was the very first name that came out of my mouth, and I'm so glad that he accepted. So without any further ado, I'd like to pass this over to Dr. John Mcnaught.
Thank you, Sean. Hello, everybody. I'm John Mcnaught. I am a white male with longish hair as a result of COVID. I am wearing a red plaid shirt that my wife picked out, and I am sitting in my campus office at James Madison University. I have a virtual background on with the JMU logo because I just moved to this office today, and I have boxes and a mess everywhere. So I'm excited to talk to you today, and I'm watching my time. So we're going to quickly talk about using theory to guide practice, and know that we're just dipping our toe in the water today. And so I know we're going to do a follow-up session where you can call in and ask specific questions. I really encourage you to do that because today, it's just going to be more of an exposure activity. All right, next slide, please. So before we get too deep into it, I just want to give you our website, www.ondetermined.org, because everything on it is free. It's all downloadable, all of the tools. We also have videos of parents, youth, and teachers talking about effective ways to build self-determination. And so I always think video examples are some of the most beneficial and easiest to learn from. You actually can hear from someone who did it. And so, again, I encourage you to check that out when you have some time. Next slide. And so when we talk about self-determination, we talk about a lot of different skills. And what you're seeing on your screen right now is what I call the elements of I'm determined. And so, it's a scaffolded approach, and that's not always the approach we take. And so what I mean is we've got to start with a certain number of skills when we're talking about self-determination, right? So we need to start with things like, how do you make choices? How do you make decisions? How do you problem solve? Once you develop those skills and meet those skills, you move on to what we call abilities, right? And so abilities are things like setting and attaining goals, self-regulation, which is just simply, the ability to monitor and control your own behaviors, and self-advocacy, speaking up for yourself when you need something. And so, with a lot of the early work around self-determination, I think a lot of us thought, oh, well, if you can self-advocate, well, then you're good to go. And that's not really true, right? So first, self-advocacy takes some base skills first, like decision-making and problem solving. And then it takes practice, right? And then it leads to the ability of being able to advocate. And then finally, once you've mastered those abilities, right, you have some beliefs. And so things like internal locus of control, that sounds kind of strange. What is that, right? So that's just the belief that you have control over the outcomes in your life. Self-efficacy, the belief that you can succeed in a certain situation, right? You've got the skills, you've got the tools in your toolbox. And then lastly, self-awareness, which is just understanding your own strengths, needs, and abilities. Now that sounds like, oh, we all should know our own strengths, right? Well, I can tell you for, over 20 years in the field of special education, even when I work with adults and tell them to write down 5 things they're good at, I get silence, right? And so you need to have some skills and abilities before you can truly get to those beliefs where you can say, yeah, these are my strengths. And you know what? These are the areas I need help with. And this isn't a disability thing. This is a human being thing, right? We all have strengths and we all have areas we need help. Next slide, please. And so we look at self-determination theory, which has 3 components we're going to talk about: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. I'm going to break each one of them down quickly. Next slide. And so when we look at that, right, big picture, the elements of self-determination are undetermined or on your left, right? And those are the skills, abilities, and beliefs we just talked about. Now, what happens a lot in education is that's where we stop, okay? And what happens is you might have those skills, but the students aren't generalizing them outside of the classroom environment, right? And so this is where the theory needs to come in. We need to filter those skills through the lens of autonomy, competence, and relatedness, which will then lead to the self-determined graduate. So we're going to break down each one of those, talk about what they mean and how you can do it. Next slide. So we'll start with autonomy. Next slide. Okay, so what is it, right? Autonomy is a big word. It sounds confusing. It just means that you feel in control of your own behaviors, right? And so what elements of I'm determined specifically target autonomy? Choice making and decision making are the skills, right, which lead to the ability of self-regulation, right, which then ultimately lead to the belief of self-awareness. Now that sounds great, but how do we do it, right? And so for teachers, how do we do it? Or parents? We build in choices, right? We give problem-solving opportunities. We teach goal setting. And when I say goal setting, I mean goals that the student picks, right? Because my wife can set a goal for me, but if I'm not bought into it, I'm not going to try very hard, right? And so a student chosen goal. Allowing failure as a learning experience is one of the most important pieces, because all the things I just talked about, failure is a potential outcome of those things, right? You might not reach your goal. You might try to solve a problem and doesn't go too well. You might make a choice and it's the wrong one. Well, guess what? That's the point, right? The point, you don't, if you already knew everything, why would you go to school? Okay. And so we need to normalize failure as part of the learning experience. Okay. I fail all the time, but you know what? I don't stop, right? I fail. I see what I did wrong, right? I assess it. I make a new plan and I try it again. Okay. And this is where it needs to happen in school, because if I'm a student and I fail in school, well, guess who's there to pick me up? My teacher, my case manager, whoever, a coach, it doesn't matter, right? But there's somebody there, okay? And they can instruct me through the process, help me understand what I did wrong and move on to the next thing, okay? That's what we need to be working on in school right now. And this can happen in school, at home, and in the community, right? Building in choices at home, building in choices in the classroom, building in choices on the job site. So one real easy way to do this, to get started, is the Undetermined one-pager. So if you go on our website and just Google one-pager, it's just a simple tool to get students started. And then another thing is to think about, if you're an educator or a student on this call, are you leading your own IEP meeting? Because that's really the first step. I know a lot of people think that that's like the ultimate in self-determination. The reality is that's just the beginning, right? And leading it means, you know, you can start with showing up, right? Are you going to the meeting? And then are you talking about yourself? Are you sharing about yourself? And there's all sorts of different resources on our website that can walk you through this. Next slide. So as I said, right, this happens across 3 environments: home, work, and school. So at home, decide when to complete chores. I do that with my children all the time. And look, as a parent, it drives me crazy that they always pick at the end of the day to do it. But guess what? It gets done, right? So ultimately, their choice, but it gets done. Work, practice different tasks with varying levels of independence. School, choosing what electives you want to take, okay? The thing to remember here, right, is that you practice, 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 right? We've got to practice these skills everywhere, right? In the classroom, at home, on the job, while we have the supports in place, okay? Normalizing failure, then understanding, you know, for the students on the call, it's okay to ask for help, right? Asking for help doesn't mean that you're going to lose control of the situation. It just means you need a little bit of help. And if you can more specifically define exactly what you need, then people can help you appropriately. Next slide. Competence. Next slide. Okay, so what is it, right? This feeling that you have the skills needed for success. And how do we build that? And what lens do we look through? So we look at skills like problem solving, abilities like self-advocacy, and then beliefs like self-efficacy and self-awareness. How do we get there? How do we build competence in individuals? Specific positive feedback. So if I walk around a room and just keep saying, good job, good job, good job, no one knows what I'm talking about, right? But if I can say to someone, Sean, I really liked how you introduced me. That was super specific and you highlighted everything I wanted you to highlight. Thank you, right? Specific positive feedback. Opportunities to respond. A lot of times in schools and in life in general, right? Opportunities to respond comes down to who can process the question the fastest, right? And so if you're a fast processor, you're always answering the questions. You're always getting a chance to respond. if it takes you a little bit, what are we doing as professionals, right, to level that playing field? So for instance, think of, let's talk about Jeopardy. Jeopardy in the first 2 rounds, right, is all about fast processing and speed, right? Because you got to race the person to the buzzer. Final Jeopardy levels the playing field, right? They ask a question, they play some music, everyone has a chance to respond, and then we see who got it right, right? Run your classroom like Final Jeopardy, not like the first 2 rounds of Jeopardy. And then as we talked about before, but you'll notice this theme is opportunities to practice, right? Nobody becomes a pro at anything without practicing, okay? And so my mentality is, and I always say, look, when do we start self-determination? Pre-K, right? Because this is, if you don't start self-determination until you're 14 or 15, there's a lot of work to do, right? So the earlier you start, the better. Now we can get you there if you started late, we can get you there, but it's so much easier to start early, okay? And then one tool we have on the website, if you want to check it out, is the Good Day Plan, right? And so the Good Day Plan is just an easy way to start building competence. Next slide, please. So let's go with thoughts first this time. I got excited earlier and went right to actions. Disability awareness is twofold. And so first, as a student, as a youth with a disability, you need to be able to articulate what your strengths are and what your needs are, right? You need to have a general understanding about how your disability affects you in different situations. And I think what we'll hear from our panelists, which I'm super excited to hear, is they're probably going to tell you the same thing. Now, for educators, it's equally important, right? And so as educators, do we, whether we're general ed or special ed, do we understand the disabilities of the students we're working with? Do we understand what their individual strengths and needs are? Can we communicate that to people outside of our field, right? In general, right now, some of our issues are lack of disability awareness among general educators, lack of disability awareness among employers, okay? And so we can't move the numbers for positive post-school outcomes until we address that. Start small, right? And so a lot of times get people really excited and they want to dive right in and change everything, right? Start small. You don't need to wake up tomorrow and run your entire IEP meeting, right? But what you could do is introduce yourself and talk about your hopes and dreams for when you get out of high school, right? Starting small. So what can this look like in different places? Home. I do this with my children. They get to cook dinner of their choosing for the family one night a week. And so I definitely scaffold my support. So they definitely need some help sometimes, depending on what the meal they choose is, right? But that's one way to build competence at work. Tell a supervisor of a necessary accommodation, right? That's that self-advocacy piece in work. Now, look, if it doesn't go well, that's okay. It's a learning experience, right? We'll go back and we'll figure out what went wrong and we'll try it again. And then at school, what can that look like? Telling a new teacher about your disability and how they can help you succeed. What I've learned, and it took me a little bit of a time to learn this, right, is that in most cases, general education teachers are more than willing to help our students out. What they don't understand is our professional language, our acronyms, right? And so if a student can explain specifically what they need to succeed, you know, in my experience, most teachers are willing to meet them there and help them out. Next slide. All right, lastly, relatedness. Next slide. Okay, so what is it? Feeling of a sense of belonging. Now, look, it only takes one other person to satisfy a sense of belonging, right? So I can just have one best friend, and for a lot of people, that's all you need, right? It could be a team, it could be coworkers, it could be people you go to church with, it could be anybody, right? But we all need that feeling of a sense of belonging. And so we look at goal setting and attainment as an ability that we need. And then ultimately for beliefs, self-awareness and self-efficacy. So how do we foster this sense of belonging? I'm a big advocate, and if I had, I told Sean and Serena I could probably talk for 3 hours, not just 20 to 25 minutes, but if I had 3 hours, I would talk to you about inclusive practices and inclusive opportunities. I am a huge advocate of both of those. To me, it makes absolutely no sense for a student with a disability to be taught math by a special education teacher. Okay, I want students with disabilities taught math by math teachers, and I want special education teachers in there to support them as needed. Okay, we can't set the bar high if we can't get our students access to the appropriate classes taught by the content specialists. So to me, that's where we begin. Inclusive opportunities outside of school, what's available, right? And so is that sports teams? Is that community groups? Is that church groups? Is that some kind of, if you have a job, some kind of group, a social group at your workplace, right? But we need to seek out those inclusive opportunities. One thing I've learned is that most people stay, both with and without disabilities, a lot of people stay close to where they grew up, right? And so if you're someone without a disability who went all the way through high school and never met a person with a disability, how open are you going to be to hiring a person with a disability when you're the manager of a store, if you've never even met somebody with a disability, right? And so inclusion. One pager, as I talked about earlier, is good. And then also the goal plan is just another way to build that. And then disability awareness, we already talked about, right? The importance of building that among all people, among all of society. Next slide. And so quickly, as I said, opportunities outside of school, awareness of your strengths and your goals, right? What are you good at and what are you working towards? Because, when I'm working for a goal, I seek out people with similar goals or people who have met the goal I'm working toward so they can help mentor me, right? And understanding that you're not defined by your disability. Just because someone puts a low expectation on you or on your students, right? We can throw that out. We don't need that. And so what's it look like at home? Joining a community group, potentially. At work, participating in an after-work social gathering, and in school, joining a school club or team. And so you got to put yourself out there. We got to push our students to put themselves out there. And if those opportunities aren't available, we need to work with people and figure out ways to make those opportunities available. Next slide. Okay, so if we do all that, right? If we look at those elements of undetermined, and if we build them through the lens of autonomy, competence, and relatedness, we're going to get that self-determined young man or woman at the end of the day. Next slide. Great. Thank you very much. Again, I'm going to stay on for the whole webinar to answer questions, and I'll also be on later on in May as you explore the website and learn more about undetermined and self-determination. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Mcnaught or John. That was excellent. A wonderful overview. And I agree. I think we could all listen to you for a whole day and really be able to just bring home so many strategies to the work we're doing at a local level. So thank you so much for being with us today. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce our second guest speaker, Hassan Davis. And I'm just so excited that Hassan was able to join John and our self-advocate panelists today. I've recently met John and I recently met Hassan, and all of the stories and experiences and work he's done is just fascinating. I'll let him tell his story, but I will say a couple of things about him, which is he is a man who experienced challenges and discrimination because of his disabilities in a very early age in elementary school, They went undiagnosed. He didn't get the supports he needed. And still, despite all of the barriers, attitudinal barriers and lack of supports, he still went on to not only earn a GED, but a bachelor's degree in communications, and then later on a law degree. He has worked in a number of systems and really is focused on keeping young people not only out of the juvenile justice system, but out of any kind of institutions and institutionalization. He was Kentucky's 5th Commissioner of Juvenile Justice and was instrumental in helping that state transform its juvenile justice and other youth serving systems. If you get a chance, please check out his 2014 memoir. It's called Written Off: How One Man's Journey Through Disability, Poverty, and Delinquency Are Transforming the Juvenile Justice System. I got it about a week and a half ago. It was a page turner. I am finished with it, and I can honestly say it was so fabulous. I'm going to have my book club read it soon. So I'm going to turn it over to Hassan because he can share his story better than I can. But I think you're going to love what he brings to this conversation, including a really practical model of immersion that he uses to train youth professionals on how to build trusting relationships with youth with disabilities who might be at high risk of criminalization, institutionalization, or segregation, and how to really support them building a future of hope, opportunity, and potential for themselves using their own voices, goals, and dreams. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Hassan.
Good afternoon, friends, and thank you for having me, Serena. My name is Hassan Davis. I am an African-American male with bald head, frame glasses, and a salt and pepper beard. And I have a shirt that reads, "Known, loved, and inspired," just because this is the place I want that to be clear. On my screen is a silhouette of young people running, and I'm going to get started. It was a day like the rest, me sitting right there with the lost kids in another special class where we would fit the round pegs into square holes all day as the teacher's excuse we were just made that way. There's no need to be worried. You've no reason to stress. Your poor lives are not fair, so you just do your best. These last words they would sing as they settle us all down, passing glue and round scissors for our popsicle stick crowns. But while crafting a band for my popsicle crown, I reached hand in the pocket and guess what I found? It was a note from my mother. Again, like last week, a reminder things don't have to stay as we see, written bold in block letters, more easy for me to read. It still took me a while, but here's what the note said. I will love you each day like the first you were mine, but to change in their eyes, you must first change your mind. If you want new results, you can't accept what they say about your needs that make them think this box is okay. To put an eagle with chicks does not mean he's to blame, but he must one day fly, son, or fail just the same. So keep your mind on your dreams and keep your eyes on that door. The inevitable victory can still be yours. To raise you up high, any risk I would take, but you, my dear boy, you must plan this escape. Now, having no thought what that last line inferred, I returned to my crown with not much of a word. But the next minute there, I spent disbelieving. No way could my eyes see what they were perceiving. A window had appeared where there'd been none before among these walls and locks and peepholes and door. From where this thing came, I could hardly have guessed, but bright light and cool breeze had just captured my breath. And outside the window, I heard sounds unknown, sounds of cheering and laughter and loud microphones. There were announcers announcing, on their loudspeakers speaking, welcoming all the champions that came from last weekend. They said, today is today. And last week was back then. On a day like this, folks, anyone could still win. Now, looking back, I'm sure they did not expect me to take those words, that excitement, so personally. But there's no control over the words that we say. Once out of the mouth, they translate their own way. Every ear that can hear must interpret for self. So I picked up my note and started up that bookshelf. Then I slipped past the teacher and over the pane of the window before they could close it again. Then I shimmied down columns just right for escaping, and I rushed myself over where people were pacing. I arrived at this field, was amazed by the scene of these runners and jumpers on all types of teams. They were stretching and reaching after prepping for months to take the first challenge, to clear the high jump. And like antelope, they leaped. None knew fear or seemed hopeless. So I slipped into line, praying no one would notice. But someone did see through my thin veiled disguise. It might have been the boots or the scared look in my eyes. I said, please let me try, sir. This looks like a blast, not like making those crowns from old popsicle trash. But the judges hemmed, then they hawed, then explained the plain truth. Your talent, your skill are not for this pursuit. They removed me from line as the stars started starting, when from up in the bleachers, big voices began barking. Maybe he's lightning, just been bottled too long. You might think he is weak, but what if he is strong? Nobody would ever try as hard as he try. And even if he falls down, he most likely won't die. From what I can guess were new fans of mine, and my mother, who must have been there the whole time, game demands I be given one shot at that bar, despite having no chance to show talent thus far. So they made me some room and they let me back in, assured there was no way I could possibly win. And soon the time came, I was finally on at the line with the silence so deafeningly long. In good humor, they played, started lowering the bar for this unknown, untested, not right superstar. But I whistled and waved, hey, you raise that right back. I can't break your records with a low jump like that. And so rolling their eyes and with fiendish sly grins, they quick raised my bar all the way up to 10. And I watched them high five. I heard one of them say, do you think that boy's smart enough to just walk away? But they all looked surprised, as in hiking boots clumping, I dashed for the mark they had set for my jumping. And with vision so clear I could hardly see through it, I leapt for that bar as if nothing were to it. There I floated. No, I sailed as the whole crowd stopped breathing. Watching me attempt this, they were not quite believing. Now, I didn't quite make it over. More truthful to say, see, I barely made half of the distance that day. But no sooner flat on the mat, I was pumping my fist, making it clear to this crowd I was quite new to this. But what they could not have known from the big smile on my face is that 5 feet had just crushed my best jump to this day. It was 2 feet higher than the mark in 3rd grade when they started to track me and how I behaved. It was 4 feet higher than in middle school buzzing. They said, soon you'll be dead or in jail like your cousins. See, this mark was the highest that had ever been set. And after trying, I knew I was not quite done yet. So I stopped my odd dancing in time to report there were kids lining up for some other great sport. But before I could make for the next crowded line, I was boxed and closed in by some old friends of mine, sent to track down the fugitive boy from room 8 for a quiet return to his class, to his place. And once back there, they tried to downplay the whole scene, suggesting that life for me was just a pipe dream. There are round pegs in your future. These square holes must be filled. It's good work for the hands and your particular skills. So I sat there a while, thinking maybe it's best that they saved me and brought me safe back to this desk. Then I looked and took note of all the names I could see of the kids they had rescued and returned before me. There was Carlos and Derek, John Tilson's name twice, Rashida, Raimundo, and my long lost friend Mike, and so many more names I could not recognize, including one signed A. Lincoln since 1825. And in the top right-hand corner, between all of those lines, there was just enough space left to finally make this seat mine. But before eyes could dim back to their early dull state, I remembered the voice and the words echoed from the stands at the race, where my mother stood shouting, waving banners sky high. So what if you fall down, boy? You most likely won't die. Then a strange courage took hold, swept right over me. I grabbed a handful of crayons and big butcher sheets. I started draft plans I'd long feared to speak. I said goals for 1 hour, 1 day, then 1 week. And with those popsicle sticks, I began to build up a small room. When complete, was a full replica of this box, where some said I would live my life out, where none would see my lost face or would hear my mad shout. Then I placed in this model, where a brave looker might see, one red X on the wall, where that window must still be. Then glancing around like I'd not done before, I spied keys to the locks on a chain by the door. And since the teachers were all busy passing more crayons and paste, I just left a note on their desk. Gone to find my next race. Going to find my next race. That is the conversation that each of us needs to be encouraging our young people to engage in. When I had the opportunity to listen to John and the framework that he just shared, I was blown away by how much it mirrors the experience that I have navigated my entire life. My name is Hassan Davis, and I am a hope dealer. I believe that every young person has a right to be engaged, empowered, and provided a clear path to their personal greatness in education, in career, and across their community life. But we're here today because we know that is not the case for every young person. As you heard in the introduction, I have had the privilege of working in systems nationally that work and serve young people. And many of them do that with a challenge at the very best. As a young person, I experienced this system in some different ways. And we only have a few minutes, but I think that it's important for you to understand something about me before I get into any deep thoughts. In the first grade, there was a day that came when the teacher, so frustrated with the boy who couldn't sit still and stop touching the things that weren't his, and standing on his desk trying to reach pieces that he wasn't supposed to be touching, the kid who couldn't take lines and make letters, who couldn't take letters and make words, who couldn't take words and make sense. That day, that teacher decided that she no longer had a responsibility to that child. So she grabbed him up by the arm and she dragged him across the room in front of his peers. When they reached the coat room, the closet in the back of the class, she turned to him and said, "This is your classroom now." And on her way out, she locked the door behind her. And that became the ritual. Every day, pulled across the room and locked in that box and told, "This is the place you belong." My mama always taught me there's two things you can do with any difficult situation you find yourself in. Figure out how you got there and figure out how you use it. Well, I knew I was there because I was that broken kid that nobody wanted to see, but I didn't know how to use it. Now, at 7 years old, my parents had just divorced after a violent domestic dispute, and we were living aunt to cousin to friend, and we were on welfare, not always eating 3 meals a day. But my mama made sure that we survived. In this closet every day, I didn't know what to do with the experience, but one day after punching the coats and screaming at the walls, I cleared my eyes and I looked up and I realized that the coat room is also where everybody keeps their lunch boxes. And so God's plan was revealed, because Susie had the peanut butter jelly sandwiches without the crust. Bobby always had fruit cups, and Jimmy always had Tang instant breakfast drink. And so for a few days, I ate good. So well that I come home, "Mama, I'm not even hungry." Until other mamas started coming to school complaining about their babies coming home hungry. And they came to investigate the mystery of the coat room like a Scooby-Doo episode. And there I was with 8 lunchboxes spread around me like a buffet. And that teacher was so frustrated that she dragged that little boy across the classroom to that special seat right next to the teacher so she could keep an eye on that bad child who eats other children's food. What she didn't do intentionally, but completely by accident, was create a possibility where there had been none. Always call it a way from no way. And that's all I needed, was a little bit of room and a little bit of courage. And you never know what can happen. From that experience, most of my childhood followed suit. I got my first arrest at 11 years old. I attended 5 different elementary schools. I lived in 13 different homes. Some of those were homes where we lived for a month and then someone would wake you in the middle of the night and say, "Get your stuff, don't turn on the lights, we've got to go. You'll be in a new school tomorrow." But through all of that, I had a family unit that made me feel powerful and seen. When my mother picked me up from the police station at 11, instead of doing the thing that is obvious in a situation like that, the screaming and the frustration and the rage, the only thing I remember of that long ride home in the car she had to borrow to come and pick me up was when I finally had the courage to look up at her, and she turned to me with huge tears in her eyes and she said, "Baby, if you could see what I see every time that I look at you, then you would know how great you already were." When we talk about the ability to imagine ourselves greater in the world, especially those of us who navigate differently, to have someone who can see us, who can encourage us without the comma, but that comes after very often. "You're brilliant, but you're going to need to try to do something. You're amazing, but you probably have to stay more calm and need to get on medication." When somebody can deliver to you an image of yourself, a reflection that does not include a caveat, it creates the space for all of those things that John just laid out in the earlier conversation to take root and to take flight. My wife calls it roots and wings, to be grounded and able to know you can go. And so I've probably got 15 more hours of things I want to say in a few minutes. But here are the pieces that are salient for me. After attending alternative school for 5 years, I was expelled and I got my GED. And for me, that was something that folks touted as an accomplishment, folks who didn't know me, that it's amazing you made it this far. I mean, but there were people like my mother and the administrator at the school, even after she expelled me, who made me believe I had a right to be more. And so I applied to go to college. And with a 1.67 GPA, a juvenile criminal record, expulsion from alternative school, having lived in 13 different homes and gone to 5 different elementary schools, I know what you're thinking, because I was thinking it too. I should go to college. And everybody, I was thinking it, but not many else was, but I applied to go to college and I heard about this college and I applied. And the week before classes started, I had not received my admission letter, which I thought was odd. Of course, I have no idea what college is like. And so I called the college collect because I couldn't afford a long distance call. And I demanded to speak to the director of admissions. And they actually put him on the line. And this goes back to what John said, you know, that confidence of asking for what you want. People can tell you no, but people told me no my whole life. And so the exception is when they go, oh, okay, I'll connect. And when the director got on, I said, hey, I'm Hassan. I applied to come to school and I haven't got my acceptance letter and classes start next week. Now that I know better, I know that meant they put me in the, oh, no, you don't file. But because I called, because I interjected my humanity into whatever story was being told to them on the page, he pulled that file out of the garbage can. And after being clear with me, he said, well, I've only got a few spots left in the freshman class. And Berea, if you don't know Berea College, it's a small school. You have to be poor to attend it, but it's very exclusive. We have thousands of applications for hundreds of spots. He said, I'm gonna have to be honest. I've got some very promising applications here and only a few slots left. I don't think this is going to work for you. And I said, well, sir, I actually really need to know for sure if it's going to work. And he said, okay, I'll call you back in a few minutes and confirm that it won't. And a few minutes later, the phone rang and it was Mr. Cook with this dazed sound to his voice. And he said, okay, Mr. Davis, I think we're going to give you a chance. Like somebody saying, just like we rehearsed it, John, I think we're going to give you a chance. And like that, I became a college student. Now, mind you, I started college in 0-level English and math courses, not even counting for credit. I would wait for my roommate to fall asleep each night, and I would get my notebook out and I would practice my handwriting on the pad that my mother's provided me, like I've been doing since 3rd grade, you know, red line, blue line, red line. And after I was sure my roommate was in deep sleep, I would get a book out from one of my classes for the next day. And I would read 4 or 5 pages over and over again for the next few hours until I was sure I'd forced enough of those pages into my mind that I could make an intuitive leap in class to prove I deserved to be there. Because I wanted to be there, even though all the data said that I wasn't supposed to. But being in that environment created the space, built the relationships, and the sense of purpose in me to keep me moving forward. In fact, I got expelled from college twice, but I returned after a year of being expelled each time and talked my way back in. And finally, the 3rd time back, I actually told them what I needed, back to what John was talking about, and asked them to help me become the person that I think I could become. They actually loaned me the money for a computer. And back in the day, it was a Mac Plus, the very first series of Macintosh computers. And it had something, I told them, it has Microsoft Write 1.1 with spell check. It's the first time spell check was ever a thing in the world. But I said, I don't even know what that is. But if I had something like spell check, I could get what's in here that I think is amazing out so you could see it and you can decide for yourself. And that convinced them to loan me $3,000, which now I guess would be about 50 grand, to get back in. And I made the dean's list my first semester back. And once I got off every probation they had on the record, I was elected president of the student body, and I was voted homecoming king. Everything about my experience changed because I was able to stay in a place that seemed hostile and build out the support. My senior year, the professor in my required graduating course, I finally had the courage to tell him, I can't read 8 books that are more than 300 pages each. And that's just something I say often, and I get the same response. They just kind of generally blow it off and say, well, you're in college, deal with it. But the next week, this professor showed up with 4 boxes of cassettes where he had gone to every retired professor on campus and asked each one to read one of the books on the cassettes, so then I could have the tools I need to compete. That is the service we're about, finding the resources to make every young person amazing as they imagine themselves to be. When I graduated college, I went on to law school. Full disclosure, I got expelled 3 times, but I never missed a day of class. One of the first things I did was I went to my vocational rehab counselor, and I thought that finally, after fighting for myself this whole time, having an advocate, I was about to tear the walls out of this place. And I'm going to tell you this as I finish, because I want you to understand this. When I went to my counselor, the first thing I noticed about her office was that one entire wall was nothing but plaques, awards, and certificates. And in my mind, I was doing my happy dance because I thought I had hit the jackpot of service advocates. And after we had our conversation and she went through my pile of records that was like, a foot deep, she looked at me with this amazing consideration and compassion. And she said, Hassan, do you know that you have failed your entire life? Then she said, I'm afraid that if I support you in law school, it's just going to be another failure. And I can't have that on my conscience, she said. So I've got these programs that I want to share with you where you can learn to do things with your hands, things you can be proud of your whole life. And I think that's going to be better for us. Now, I want you to be clear about a few words, the word us and her conscience. When you are working as a champion and advocate for others, but you're putting your emotions and your sense of what's important first, then you are not working as a champion or advocate. And so, unfortunately, that was my last visit with my counselor. And I realized that I was going to have to make the next 3 years in the hardest education environment I'd ever be in, like I made the last 15 on my own, pushing and demanding things that other people don't think I deserve. And none of us should have to do that. And so I know in all the years that have passed, Voc Rehab and all of these supports have changed dramatically. And what I want to encourage you to do is remember, and going back to John again, because he said that this is about creating space and opportunities for people to find success. I always say that the only place that you find ability comes before opportunity is the dictionary. Everywhere else, we have to give people exposure and experiences to things before they can actually become accomplished at them. And it's just the opposite when we think about young people experiencing the world different. And so you are the ones who ought to be creating those spaces, those experiences for social interaction, for good work experiences and trial and error to happen. Failure is the most constant thing in my life, just like my Voc Rehab counselor said, but it is also the thing that has given me an armor plating so thick that I can walk through fire and walls. And if we can see all of that, then we have the ability to really serve and support young people as they advocate for their greatest lives and their greatest possibilities, well beyond the things we could imagine. I got myself all crazy here. So I'm going to take a deep breath. And I know that I've hit my time limit somewhere in this conversation. So I'm going to stop because I want to hear also from our amazing young folk who are navigating this world now and creating some space. And then I'm hoping we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So I'll stop here with a comma, not a period, to see what's next. And I want to thank all of you for being here in this conversation, because this is the most important conversation we could be having. Thank you.
Wow. I'm so emotional right now, and I know many others are too. That was so inspiring and on point, and clearly from someone who has experienced the systems and is now a tremendous change agent in our world. So I want to really honor Hassan for sharing his story and his perspectives, and really teaching us some valuable lessons that hopefully we'll all take back to our work. Thank you. So now it's my pleasure. Gosh, what a great day. I'm telling you, I'm on a high. I get to moderate the self-advocate panel now, which I'm so excited about. I'm going to ask Donald if he'll put the slides up again. And I'm going to ask my esteemed presenters or panelists for this next panel, Patrick, Josh, and Kamisha, to go ahead and put your videos on as well. And we're going to try to do this as a virtual panel. I'm going to ask some questions of the panelists, and then they're going to share their examples. And I think it should work that as each person speaks, you should see their face in the speaker view. So we'll try this out. And everyone's, Kamisha is waving, and this is a great group. So is Josh now. So I'm gonna just start with Patrick. Patrick, I just want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, where you're from, where you graduated, and what you're doing now.
Hello, everyone. Just for those who are blind, such as myself, or legally blind or low vision, I am an African-American male with short curly hair with a light polo collared shirt. And I am from Orangeburg, South Carolina. Currently, I am a senior at the University of South Carolina Upstate, majoring in English with a minor in Spanish interpreting and education. And also, I am here representing ABLE, South Carolina as well.
Great. How about Kamisha?
Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Cool. So my name is Kamisha Haribo. I work with an organization called Mass Advocates Standing Strong. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I'm happy to be here today. And I currently live in Canton, Massachusetts. I officially graduated so my class graduated in 2012, but I officially left school in 2015. And I am currently trying to get my GED.
Awesome. Thank you, Kamisha. And now Josh. Josh, can you tell us your full name and where you're from?
Yes. Hi, my name is Dotto. I live in Redmond, Utah. I have red hair. I have brown eyes. I have a red beard, and I have a red white shirt. I have jean and boot on. I graduated in 2014 with my cash, but what I love being with all you guys to tell what my story is.
Great, Josh. And can you tell us where you're working now? a little bit about your job?
Yeah, I work at going feed at a farm. I am helping people with telling what the story about the farm is, and I work with animals all day long.
Great, thank you. And for those that saw the pictures earlier of our speakers, there's one of Josh holding an emu, which we were pretty impressed by. We all got to talking the other day. Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide, Donald. Great, and these are some questions related to your transition experience while you were in high school. So I think we'll start with Kamisha. And just asking a couple of questions. You know, when you were in high school, did you have any idea about what you wanted to do when you left school? And did you have access to some experiences to help you think about that, like internships, apprenticeships, or just developing some skills important to getting a job?
So when I was in high school, I knew what I wanted to do. I was working while I was in high school. I did a bunch of volunteer jobs, and I got my job now where I'm working now through a summer program. So I work with the Mass Advocates Standing Strong, and I've been there since 2000. I've been there for 2 years prior, but I've been there since 2015.
That's great, thank you. Patrick, how about you?
So for me, I was privileged enough to have a plethora of those supporting me, such as the Commission for the Blind and the people they're partnered with, Successful Transitions, where I worked with Mrs. Green, where she exposed me to various of different like college campuses, so I could help decide on what school I wanted to go to, as well as internships, because I was really indecisive on what I really had planned for after high school. I knew I wanted to go to college and pursue a career, but I really had an interest in everything. I wanted to be an occupational therapist once, a physical therapist, ophthalmologist. But in short, because of the exposure that they gave me and I was exposed to a lot of it, I interned at Carolina Physical Therapy, in Carolina Speech Pathology, as well as the library. Once I started interning at the library, I realized that education was for me and that I do enjoy working with children and young adults and helping them succeed.
That's great. And Josh, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in high school? Did anyone kind of influence you about what you wanted to do? Did you know what you wanted to do?
Yes, a lot of my teacher to tell me what my to what I want to do for my lifetime. I have a job at a digital touring. I do every done with my college. When I done with school, I go to work, and my neighborhood do a lot of stuff for me. My family do stuff for me. A lot of my teachers say you do whatever you want to do for your lifetime.
That's great, very encouraging. I think that goes back to what Hassan said, how important it is to have people that kind of encourage you and give you hope and make you feel seen and empowered. So that's great. Donald, I think we're ready for the next slide. And ShareNet, I think the ASL interpreters are ready to be switched if you haven't already done that. Thanks. One question before we get in here that Victoria, one of our participants asked, that's not on here, but I know you guys can answer it real quick, is she was asking, do you guys live alone or independently? Do you live with some friends or a roommate? or do you live with family? What's your living situation, if you don't mind us asking?
So I lived with my family for a bit, and now I'm living on my own. I've been living on my own for about almost 6 months now, so it's pretty cool.
Wonderful. How about you, Josh?
I live with my family, but I want to have my own place, to call my own and have family, have my own family.
That's great. Wonderful. And Patrick?
So currently I'm living home with my family, but which is unfortunately because of the pandemic, but usually I am on campus at my university.
Awesome. And I think a lot of folks, young people with and without disabilities, had to kind of move home temporarily because of the pandemic. So you're not alone in that.
Yeah.
So just some perspectives real quick on your transition supports. And we'll start, I think we'll start with Josh again. Were there people in your high school, like teachers or school counselors, that helped you plan for the future? And what was it about them that made you feel supported or encouraged you to pursue your dreams?
A lot of my teachers say, every time I have a problem or need to talk to people, them say, okay, let's find a job you is a lot more doing. But I find a lot of volunteers opportunities to where I want to work at. And when I work at the farm, I am volunteer, but a lot of teachers say when we would up to a different would online to see what you like to do for your life.
That's great. Patrick, how about you? How were you encouraged during school?
So in school, because I have a visual disability, I was given a mobility instructor who helped me use my mobility cane to be more independent in that area. And also I was given a vision teacher who taught me not only Braille, but also how to distinguish the difference of like coins, ways to fold in your money without using sight, because with my disability, I have retinitis pigmentosa, which is a mouthful, and myopia. So that I am going through this journey of vision loss. So in that instance, hence the reason why I had to have those people as resources. And then I also had a resource teacher who assisted me with ensuring that I had proper accommodations in the classroom.
That's great. Kamisha, how were you encouraged in high school to pursue your dreams and your goals related to adulthood?
So I would talk a lot to my counselor and my friends and the people around me, and they would always say, especially my dad would and my mom would always say, you can go after wherever you want, like Patrick and just said. So like I've learned a lot from them, and like I continue to learn a lot from them. So I'm very grateful.
Great. And Kamisha, while we have you, just to kind of turn the question upside down, were there people in the school system or vocational rehabilitation that weren't that supportive and discouraging? And how did that hurt your confidence about your future?
They probably didn't mean to, but yes. I remember a specific teacher. I wanted to go to a Spanish class, and we were in our, I was in the IEP meeting, and then my IEP meeting was done, And then she pulled me aside and started having a conversation with me. And she basically said, like, um, no to me going to Spanish class because I wanted to go to Spanish class so I can be a translator. But now I'm going to try to get my GED so I can become a Spanish translator eventually and to follow my other goals.
That's fabulous, Kamisha. Just like Hassan said, just keep going and don't let people deter you. In the interest of time, I'm going to go with Josh on this one, and then Patrick, I'll probably jump to the next question with you. But Josh, can you tell us a little bit about anyone that kind of, wasn't that helpful and kind of discouraged you, and how did that hurt your confidence?
A lot of people not understand what I trying to do. Doctors say I bite, or you have a job, or have a bit fine fan, but like a lot of my teacher say you are so smart and so appreciated when we you or catch for you guys.
Excellent, thank you. Patrick, actually, if you can just weave this in, and then I'm going to start with the next question with you too.
So there's been quite a few experiences in regards to people just being discouraging. It wasn't any of those who were actually working with me. It was usually when I started college, and I was going through this student teaching process, internship sort of freshman year, and it was a whole lot of othering because I had a disability, even though my focus was English. She told me that I will work best with the handicap because I'm more familiar with that. And it was other instances such as that that really was upsetting. But because the Commission for the Blind introduced me to Ava, South Carolina, which many of you probably don't know or do know, 80% of those working there do have a disability. So I was able to vent. And also, I still have the context of those who used to work with me in high school just to keep me encouraged. And I also learned as a self-advocate to filter out the bad things so that I could reach my success and my goals.
Excellent, thank you. You can hear from these young people their tenacity and commitment to going big or in their lives. The next slide, Donald, these are our last questions, and we're going to give everybody about 30 seconds to a minute to do these, but we really would love to hear the advice that you all would give both young adults, youth and young adults as they're transitioning from school related to seeking employment, and also what advice you would give to people who are working with students in terms of how best to be supportive. So Patrick, do you want to start us off here?
I can. So advice I would give to those working with students with disabilities was to just meet them where they're at. Because the person you see today is not who I started off as when I was first diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. It was a journey for everyone, and it was really helpful. It was very helpful that they didn't overwhelm me with too much information or too much involvement when it came to me trying to process my disability and adjust to it. So that's the advice I would give to those working with students with disabilities. And for those students with disabilities seeking employment, I would advise, because there are like many advices that you could give in regards to the workforce and employment, but I would advise just to simply come up with ways such as affirmations that I have and that many of my teachers would ask me to repeat to myself so that I could keep going. And that is, if it is to be, it is up to me. And that's something that I hold true still to this day.
Great. I love that. Kamisha, how about you?
Sorry, I was muted. What advice I would give to students and to people who are working with students is to like be like be communicative with your students, and the sky is the limit. No matter what anybody else says, your dream is your dream, and nobody can take that away from you. One thing I would give to like educators or whoever is like make sure that you're putting or you're trying to put the individual first, and make sure that you guys are both being heard instead of it being a one-sided conversation. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Communications and transparency is key. So Josh, you get the last word, and I'd love for you just to end with, what would you tell other young people about, pursuing employment and anyone that's helping them along the way? What advice would you give?
Like saying I do the same same thought. Like you that's timing the limit. You do every what you want for your dream. You do it, and that's the limit. And but I love I'm happy. I speak on this beautiful day, talk to you about what my experience is, but the young adult they say keep up and follow your dreams.
I love it. I love it. I want to encourage participants just to give everybody a clap in your home right now. I told John and Hassan that no matter how incredible they are, and as you know, they were pretty incredible, that this advocate panel would steal the show. So I'm sure you all agree. I'm going to turn it over to Sean. I'm also going to let folks know that we'll keep this open for until about 4:35. So just to allow for a few more questions. So be sure to put them in the chat box or in the Q&A, and I'm going to turn it over to Sean. And any of the speakers, go ahead and open or turn on your video so that you can answer questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Serena. Thank you, John and Hassan and Josh and Patrick and Kamisha. If we were live, in a live setting, we'd be all giving you a huge ovation right now. It was a great, great presentation. So we do have a couple of questions. There was one comment about how the content was really good, and this is from a VR counselor. He wishes all of his schools could be here. That leads us to this is being recorded and it will be archived. And so if you feel like this is information that other people need to see, go ahead and send them the link. And we encourage you to, I think it's May 7 for the office hours, that you can come and ask additional questions. Robert asked for the self-advocate panel, what was it like being in special education? Do you feel like you did better than you were given credit for? So I know that's kind of a big question. And I would give you just a chance to think about it. Maybe start with Patrick. Were you in special education?
I was in special education in elementary school, and then later, whenever I entered middle school, they put me into an inclusive classroom where I was then given a resource teacher. And I would say, from what I remember with special education, is that I did not, I do not prefer it still to this day. And it, in some aspects, it was a little helpful, but just as a child there, and I was simply being put into this small closeted classroom, it just showed me that separate isn't equal, and that a lot of the stuff that we were given we weren't really given too much of the access to it, to some of the information that other kids were given. And when I transitioned into an inclusive classroom, and once I gained the confidence in using my assistive technology with the help of Miss Irwin, I was then able to see that it was a whole lot of learning involved in the classroom, and that it also shows children, and it showed me, that this is what the world actually looks like, and we should all be exposed to diversity.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick, for sure. Josh or Kamisha, would you like to answer that question? What was it? Were you in special education, and do you have any thoughts about that experience?
Yes, I was in special education. It was in a public school setting, so it was like part high school and part um yeah, it was a public school education public school setting. It was like regular class, and then like I would go into my classroom. I did have one there was one class where I did go with everybody, which was English class. I would say it was a lot different. It was a lot different, but like the same kind of, cause like I don't know how to explain it, but it was an interesting dynamic. I there were some things that I learned and some things that I like, I wish like I could do more outside of the school system, but overall it was like a good school.
Thank you. Josh, did you want to chime in?
Yeah. Yet I same thing she say. I am in the special ed program, and by when I go out to go to gym or go out to dance or food or and stuff, um but by I go out by gym, dan and food and stuff.
Thank you for that. And there's another question that came in for the self-advocate panel, which I think is a very intriguing question. Would love to hear your thoughts on this. Kim asks, what would you like to say to people who try to help too much? What is the best way to ask if someone needs help and not to overstep into enabling? So have you ever had an experience where people have tried to help you too much and you've had to tell them to kind of back off and let you do it yourself? And what is a good way to handle that as a self-advocate? And whoever wants to hop in.
Say I wanted one to do it by myself. Before I do that, let me give you a bubble and say, hey, I need help to doing this. You come back in my bubble, but a lot of teachers need to add to tell them and say what you need help with or what you need more being but every time I be in school, I have a hard. I want to say the time. I want to have by myself. I gotta tell you to do help me.
Josh, that's great. I love the idea of the bubble. Yeah, I'll let you in when I need you in. That's awesome. Kamisha, any thoughts on that question?
Yes, I had a boss that said, if you need help, ask for it. I am the type of person who likes to do things for myself, as much as possible. I like to be independent, and if I get stuck, then I would ask someone to help me. But if I feel like I can do it myself, I will ask for help.
Patrick?
I would just basically say that I am the pilot in this flight, and I am the pilot for this flight in life, and that you would just follow, like helping me with you is you following by my lead, because I'm the expert in what my needs are.
Yeah, that exactly. That's a great message. You know, we as Serena said, we're going to keep it open just a few more minutes. If you're able to join us for the remainder, fine. If not, thank you for joining us. Please fill out the evaluation and the survey. What I'd like to do, though, is I'd like to give John and Hassan just a quick opportunity to respond either to that last question or just in general about what they heard today. Any kind of last thoughts? So let's start with John. Give you the floor for a minute and just see if you had anything else that you'd like to add.
Sure. I think that last question about helping too much is a great question. And I think the panelists nailed it. I think, as long as we're starting young, right, and teaching all kids to ask for help when they need it, we don't need to be jumping in if we're not asked to jump in. And so, for all kids aren't going to learn if we keep doing it for them, right? And so, and then we wonder why they're 20 and they don't have any skills. And so, even with my own kids, I know the temptation. People enter the teaching field because they're helpers, right? And they've got this desire to help. And I think what I've learned over 20 years, and I think what these panelists have learned much quicker than I have, is that by jumping in to help, we're often hurting, not helping. And so understanding that, we learn through practice and we learn through failure. And that's okay, as long as we're there to help pick them up and to assess what went wrong and try it again, right? And not jumping in before they even had a chance to try anything. So I think that's self-determination in a nutshell.
That's excellent. Thank you, John. And Hassan, I think what we may be giving you the final word here on this, on the subject.
I don't know if I should be the final word, but I really do appreciate being in this conversation. And these young folks, well, you said it, and Serena said it, I mean, they are the work and the example. So I really appreciate being able to hear them and their experience. What I would like to say as we close is that too often in this work, we get caught up thinking we're doing hope work, but we're really doing hospice work. If you're in your subconscious are trying to give these young, amazing people great end-of-life experiences because it's going to just be hard for them from here on out, then you're not doing the right work. This is about hope. This is about possibility. And it's about following their lead, as you've heard them clearly say. And I think that's the work. We are hope dealers, not hospice care workers. And we have to keep that really clear in our head and hearts if we're going to really do the work we came to do.
Well, I'm gonna, on behalf of Serena and everybody at the Yes Center, thank you so much for all of you, Hassan and John, Josh, Patrick, and Kamisha for joining us. This has been energizing and inspiring, and thank you just for spending the time. Remember May 7, if you have, it's in the chat box if you want to join us for some additional questions with John and Hassan. That will be 12 o'clock Eastern for what we're calling office hours. And we do these webinars monthly, so just be on the lookout for other great topics. So I'm going to hand it back over to Donald, but just say thank you to everyone for a great session.
Thanks,
Can I
Sean.
just add something really quick? Transition is different for everybody, and we are still in transition. No matter what it looks like. So, however the individual may look at it. That's all I had to add. I'm sorry.
That's no apologies needed. That's a great way to end it, and it's a great point. Donald?
I believe Serena is going to tell us about the next 2 events we have coming up. I'm going to give her a moment.
Yeah, just really quick. We have decided to do something new for the next few webinars to give people an opportunity to do some real dialoguing with some of our presenters. So we're going to start with John on Friday, May 7th from 12 to 1:30. These are open only to our registrants of this webinar to give you a little more opportunity for some depth and breadth. You'll be able to ask questions. The whole thing is about questions, about how do you take the strategies he talked about today and implement those in real time on the ground in the communities you're working in. We're going to have Hassan a little later that month to be determined. So keep an eye out on the Yes Center emails that we will be sending just to registrants. But that'll be another 12 to 1:30 time frame. Again, we also want you to really keep a lookout. We're going to work on some podcasts with the self-advocates and possibly with Hassan and John, because we want you to get the word out, because there were a lot of people that missed out on this incredible webinar, and that's just a shame. So we want to spread the love a little bit. And then our next monthly webinar will be on May 26th at 3 o'clock, and I'll turn it back over to Donald.
Okay, well, again, we've got a couple additional dates coming up, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about what will happen with this webinar. As soon as I end the webinar, you're going to get, your screen will pop up with a link to take the survey. The link is also in the chat box. It's maybe scrolled a little bit past at this point, but we would really appreciate your feedback. We definitely read it all and use it to try and decide what our agenda for the next upcoming offerings will be. So if you don't see it in the chat or at the close of this webinar, we'll be sending out a follow-up email that will also have the link to that survey, and then we'll prod you with a few reminders. And then we recorded this webinar, and we will be posting it within the next few days, and you'll receive an email also with the link to the recording and to the captioning transcript for this webinar. Anyway, thank you, everybody, and we hope to see you at the office hour in next month.